All right. So I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes to settle in. Hi, Ose. Thank you for joining. Hi, Leah. I presume we'll see a few of the participants funneling in very shortly. Hi, Nat. Thanks for joining. Hello, Christine. Hi, Sue. Bonjour. So as we wait for our participants to trickle in, I will wish everybody a happy lunch hour. Thank you for sharing it with us. I'm Eric, and we also have Leah on the line, who's going to be helping to animate the dialogue. Leah, you can say hi to everybody as we're getting ready.
Hey, everyone.
So Leah's going to help me by monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So we want to make this an interactive webinar. If you do have questions at any point, please do feel free to use the Q&A or chat icons below, and we will entertain any and all questions or do our best to do so.
Yeah.
So
if you need to message me specifically to ask something, that's fine too.
So I'll leave another minute or so before we get started. If you need to get a glass of water, lunch, whatever you need to get you through this. We'll get started very shortly, but we'll get settled in let's call it another minute, and then I will get rolling. So thank you again for joining us. I'm very excited today to be sharing our What Should I Do with My Surplus Money, otherwise known as RRSP planning, otherwise known as TFSA planning, debt planning. So all that wrapped into one. So very excited to be sharing that with you all today. All right, so as we're just waiting on that, so reminder again, you can use the chat or Q&A function below. You can have a go with that. Leah is going to be monitoring it, so if you do have any questions at any point, please feel free. So it is 12:03, so let's get started. Okay, so this is going to be compliance happy. I'll talk for 10 seconds, but essentially very, very excited to be sharing today some big thoughts in terms of how we think about financial planning from a RRSP savings side of things versus TFSA versus debt versus RESP. So we're going to try to simplify all of those in a framework and some handy to use questions moving forward. So that's the goal of it today. Tailored towards the savers that are thinking of putting money away, but also not precluding individuals that are either in retirement or thinking about retirement and putting all that together. So this is our team. I'm the one in the middle, and Per and Jeff also round out our advisory team. And then we have Ose and Leah, who are also on the call today, who help make the practice run. So thank you to everybody. And this is our team. So helps put a name to the face. Okay, so the big question that we're going to look to answer today, what should I do with my money? I mean, essentially a big question, but we're going to try to distill it into a few paths or frameworks for you to think about. So say you have some money to invest. The question is, what do I do? You can save it, you can spend it, or you can pay down debt. Essentially, those are three of the big options that you have. I'm sure you can conjure up some more convoluted, but and essentially, if you want to bucket it into three different types of things, spend it. So have it go out the door, put it away, save it, or pay down debt. So those are the three big ones that we're going to look at today. I'm going to try to help conceptualize all of those options for us. So the question that I get often from clients, I mean, we have 450, close to 500 clients that we help manage. And a lot of the younger savers or the ones that are starting to build their nest egg are often asking, how do I know if I'm saving enough? That's one of the most oftenly asked questions. And with the help of Jeff, who's been doing this for 35 years, we've been able to come up with a golden rule of thumb, hence the golden egg that we like to use to help you benchmark if you're doing just that. And our rule of thumb is really, and our number one insight for this tip today, is that you should be saving between 15% of your net income annually. And if you do that automatically, you are essentially never going to have to worry about money ever again. So again, this is a good rule that I like to remind my younger clients that are starting off in their investing journeys. Maybe they're making a big salary and they're anxious to spend it all. But if we do this from a young age and we build that habit, then we take care of our future self and future self very quickly. So that's our insight number one for all the young savers that are out there might be listening. That's our golden rule. If you can figure out a way to save between 15 to 20% of your income annually and do that automatically, you are one step ahead of the game. So we're going to look at some tips in which you can achieve that 15 to 20%. If you're looking at your bills and you're looking at your cash flow and saying, how is that even possible? We're going to get to a few tips that are going to help you achieve that. So that's to come. Before we get into that, quick reminder, TFSAs and RSPs, there's two general types of accounts that we have to use at our disposal. The open account, the non-registered account is a third type, and I'll spend a few moments on that, but I wanted to set the base for everybody. Most of you might know this already, but it's a good refresher and it's a good reminder of what we can do and certain specifics. So TFSA essentially can be used for short-term savings, long-term savings, but contributions are made with after-tax money, so you don't get a refund or a deduction on your taxes if you make a contribution to your TFSA. You can take money out at any time, put money in at any time. You just have to be wary of the contribution limits. And if you never had a TFSA and you turned 18, I believe it was 08 or 07, then you would have accumulated up to $81,500 in unused room that you can now use. So that's the benefit of the TFSA. After tax money goes in there, you can invest in almost anything under the sun. And anytime you withdraw, you're not taxed on that. So that's TFSA. RSP, more so tailored towards retirement with a few exceptions. You can withdraw up to $35,000 as a first-time home buyer. So it's one of the tools that we like to use for clients that are looking to start saving and to buy a home. And you can also withdraw up to $25,000 for the lifelong learning plan, which allows you to use some of your RSP towards your education, master's plan, for example. So those are two exceptions to your retirement savings rule for RSPs. But a few caveats being, so RSP contributions and RSPs in general aren't tax free like the TFSA is, but they're tax deferred. So what that means is you get to save the tax essentially today for anything you put in your RSP, but you have to pay the tax later when you withdraw that. Now, there's no requirement to start withdrawing till your RSP, till the end of the year that you turn 71. And even then you only have to start withdrawals at the age 72. So you might have a long time horizon if you're just starting out. If you're getting closer to retirement, it might be time to start turning on the tap, and that has to come out. So that's how that works. And then RSP contributions, you get a refund. So you get to deduct, say you put $15,000 to your RSP in this tax year, and tax year includes the first 60 days of the following year. So for this 2021 tax year, hello Per, greetings. You have up until March 1st to make a contribution that can be applied, and you can choose 2021 tax year or 2022 tax year. So that's the benefit there. CRA is always a little bit slow and backwards, so we have that kind of carryover period with that. So that's how the RSP works on the contribution side of things. You get to deduct that from your income, and you get a refund if you've paid taxes throughout the year. And when you look to withdraw from your RSP, that essentially gets added to your income, and you have to pay taxes on that. So that's how that works. A little bit, there's a few nuances between the TFSA and RSP, but two tools that we can use in building your long-term growth and also using to achieve your savings goals. So that's how it works in terms of contribution room. You $6,000 in new room for this year for your TFSA, plus anything that's unused in the past. And for your RSP, it's 18% of your last year's earned income. Again, CRA always kind of takes a year or two to catch up. So 18% of last year's income. 2022 room is 29,000. That's the max. And 2021, if you made over, say, about 150, it's 28,000. So that all accrues. You don't lose it. It's not as if you don't lose it. If you use it, you lose it. That accrues like TFSA room. So a quick primer on that. We'll get to when you should use these different types, but I wanted to give that expose so we know what we're working with. So let's get to 4 questions to help you decide where to divest. So say you might have bonus money sitting in your bank account, you might have Christmas money, Hanukkah money. A question we often get at this time of the year, and I like to call January and February are the money months. So they're quite a busy time, and it's a great time. People are thinking money, people are thinking planning. So it's a great time to be overlooking and reviewing your plan and seeing what am I contributing to, what's available in contribution room, and what should I do given what my goals are. So we've come up with 4 different questions to help you decide where to allocate your funds. First one being, how much did you earn in 2021? So the question that we often get about RRSPs is, should I make a contribution to my RRSPs? And to answer that, we have to know how much you earned in 2021. Further to that, we also want to know, is that more or less than you earned in the previous year and more or less than you expect to earn in the next year? Because the question about RRSPs, taking a step back, is really about what your tax rate is. So for example, say last year you didn't work at all, you took a sabbatical, you traveled the world. This year you jumped in a sales job and you're killing it, you're making 200,000. You're making a lot more this year than you did in last year. So making an RRSP contribution last year when you made very little generally does not make much sense, because you're not using your income to your advantage and you're not going to be generating a large tax refund or tax savings on anything that you put to your RRSP. Plus, you won't have anything to deduct against. But if you're making, say, over 200,000 and you're in the top tier, close to the top tier, 53% in Ontario, you're going to get essentially 50% of that back, depending on how much you put into your RRSP, which is a great refund and bang for your money. I mean, if somebody told you, you give me $1,000 and I give you 50% of that, just for being selective and allocating that to your RRSP, take that any day of the week. I don't know of an investment off the top of my head that will guarantee 50% rate of return in a day or in 2 months, and essentially when you complete your taxes. So that's how the RRSP works, and generally advantageous when you are at higher levels of income. There are different scenarios where you might not be in the top tax bracket, but it still does make sense to contribute to an RRSP. So we generally say, I mean, under the $50,000 question mark, generally say keep your RRSP room accruing and leave that for later when maybe you plan to make more. That being said, we can start using it if you're looking to save for first-time home buyers, for example. So there are often times where it is worthwhile, but generally we like to say if your income was over 100,000, it's seriously worth considering, because you're going to get a nice refund on that. So question number 1 in deciding where to contribute is, 1, how much did you earn in this year? If it was a lot, if you did great, then it's definitely worth considering putting money towards an RRSP. I will pause to see if there are any questions. And Leah, please feel free to jump in. So Leah, how about you ask them, and then I will offer my thoughts.
So no new questions yet, but we did have 1 or 2 before the webinar, which is which RRSP gives the best returns and biggest mistakes we make. And I think you covered a little bit of that actually when you talked about contributing to your RRSP and the conditions under which you should do it. So that's a good start.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for that. Let's hold that biggest return question. I wish I had the crystal ball, but there is a section on investment options that we will get to later. So I'll address biggest return then, and then I will also touch on biggest mistakes we make throughout. But one of the biggest ones we make is not using the calendar to our advantage, AKA being mindful of these deadlines and bringing about action. If that action is just about reviewing and seeing if it makes sense, then that's perfect. Inaction is, I guess, one of the biggest mistakes, especially if you earned a lot and you have cash to invest right now. So I would say the biggest mistake is inaction and not looking at your options. And if there's another one that comes to mind, I will jump into that. So thank you for that. And Leah, please do interrupt if anything comes up or questions do come up throughout. So that's number 1. And Per, please feel free to do the same. So question number 2, and helping to determine is, let's get back to it. When will you need the money? So say you like to have a buffer of 5,000 in your account. Bonus has been paid out, Christmas money, you have 20,000 to invest. So that leaves 15,000, 20 minus 5, that you could look to allocate. So the question, as we go back to our roads analysis, you can either spend that all and for your immediate benefit, go down to Mexico, ball out at a villa. That brings you immediate joy. Well, might be a little trickier. You have to do a PCR test and all that. So it might bring a little bit more headache, and flights might be expensive, but that's one option. Or 2, you can look to save and cut some for your expenses. So When you talk about saving, we're thinking about future you, and we're talking about spending, you're almost thinking about immediate you. There is a way to generate happiness for both, which is why we're looking at this whole analysis. So the question becomes, when will you need the money? A few examples to kind of delve into this. So for one, say you are self-employed and you've made, it's been a good year, your different customers bill you throughout the year. You don't pay taxes, but you tend to settle up at the end of the year. You might have a big tax bill owing, in which case it would be great to do a review and see what you do owe before you look to allocate anything, because we've had a few scenarios where there's such a large tax bill that you have to plan to keep some money aside. And therefore you can't put all of that towards savings. So that's one of the scenarios, is when will you need the money? What are the particulars regarding your scenario? So that's looking at the self-employment side. If you're a salaried employee and you've been paying taxes throughout the year, you might have renos or big expenses coming up. And if that's the case, it's a good time to say, you know, I might need this money in 3 to 5 months. And if not, I have a longer time horizon. So that determination is one that you can answer. And with that, we can determine whether it makes sense to invest or not. Let me give another concrete example. Say you've signed up a contractor to come redo your bathroom. You've had old wainscoting and it's been moldy and leaky, and you finally settled on getting workers in to give it a refresh, and that they might start working next week. So that's something where you might not want to allocate all your funds, say, to an RSP where you'd get a refund, but likely only when you get your taxes done in April. So the question of what is your upcoming payment schedule and what do you need the money for and when is very important in determining where we can allocate funds. So that's part of you doing your homework, seeing what's coming up over the next 2-3 months, and that's part of the discussion to be had. So that is question 2 of 4 in helping to navigate this area. Number 3 is, how much do you have to invest? So, which also figures in, if I go back to when will you need the money, question of how much do you have to invest is going to help us in determining whether you should be putting it towards TFSA and RRSP. So once you've determined, you looked at your bank account and you say, okay, I've got this amount that I can allocate towards investments. I don't need it next month. I can use this for future me. So a year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, no time horizon. Okay, great. We have some leeway to play with. Question of how much do you have to invest will then help us decide if we can contribute to an RSP or TFSA. So that's the next portion of it, trying to get down to, this is a rough amount of what I'd be comfortable putting away. And question number 4 is, what is your debt rate? And this only applies if somebody has, say you own a home, you own a property, or you even have a personal line of credit or another line of credit that you owe on, or even student debt. So knowing what your debt picture is and how much is outstanding and what the rate is going to help us as well put all the pieces together. The last point is whether your debt is variable or fixed, and that essentially means that your rate will either go up or down as the prime rate moves. So knowing all those details, you have what you need in terms of building a plan, and that's where kind of myself, Per, Jeff can come in and help sketch something out. I've been doing, I think, 3 of these a day for the last 3 weeks, so it's a good time to plan for the year ahead. And once you have all these information points in your arsenal, you can build a great plan for the year. Okay, so this is kind of the mastermind in terms of how to put all of this together. So I'll run through a few scenarios to help really illustrate this. But essentially, there is a bit of an art and a science to it, but there is a rationale for everything. So say you are a young saver and you're earning under $50,000 annually, you're just starting out, generally would make sense to start your savings in your TFSA. It's the most flexible. If you need cash for a car or a home or you want to travel, it allows you to put the money in, take the money out, no tax implications, plus you're saving tax-free. So that's great. Caveat being that you might want to start building up your RSP room so you can take advantage of the first-time homebuyers plan that we talked about earlier, where you can withdraw up to $35,000 from your RSP, essentially tax-free, and then pay yourself over the next 15 years to recoup that. So there's a bit of an art and science in terms of the TFSA and the RSP in that purposes, but generally looking at the TFSA first makes a lot of sense. The RESP starts to make sense, well, when you have kids and you have free cash flow available. But essentially, without getting into the ins and outs, we could probably do another RRSP webinar on that altogether. Essentially, if you put up to $2,500 in any given year for one child, that's the max, the government's going to match 20%. So you're essentially getting a guaranteed rate of return of 20% on anything that you put into your RRSP up to that $2,500 amount per individual. So if you're looking purely on a rate of return basis, the RRSP will get you, say, 20% right off the bat if you're putting money in up to your $2,500. The RRSP, depending on your income, can give you up to 53% in form of a tax refund by putting $1 in there, again, depending on your income. And your TFSA essentially will give you zero, but it will give you the investment growth. So you won't get any immediate return for putting money in, but you will benefit from the tax-free growth once the money is in there. So that's how we look to think of all this. And then on the other end of it is the open or non-registered account. Generally, we like to use that once the other buckets have been filled up. So that acts as it is a taxable account. So you do have to pay taxes on investment income, interest income, dividends, capital gains throughout the year. So there's a little more in the sense of taxes, but if your TFSAs are topped up, RSPs are topped up, RESPs are topped up, that tends to be the catch-all account. So think of it as a savings account where you can hold your investments. So that's to put a little bit of the pieces together. Let's look at a scenario where you earn more than $50,000 a year. If you're earning more than $50,000 a year, it would start to make sense to look at the RSP because you're getting a nice refund for any amount that you're putting in there. If you have $50,000 in RSP room and you made $50,000, it generally wouldn't make sense to use all of that to bring your income down to zero because the Canadian tax system operates on a sliding marginal scale. So the higher up you go, the higher the tranches of income that are taxed at a higher rate. So if you make about $13,000, I think it is, you essentially have to pay no taxes. So really there is a calculation to be made to only lower your income a certain amount so you benefit from the RSP refund. So generally it doesn't make sense to bring your income down to zero. It's a question I get often, but once individuals start to notice how the tax system works, they understand that. So if you're in that scenario, it makes sense to contribute to an RSP. Question of how much will depend on how much you have to save, what your income was, and what your goals are. So that's something that we can help with. If you've topped up your RSP, then surplus can go to your TFSA. If you have children, RSPs, another great way to save for their education and benefit from that 20% government matching as well. And then if all those are topped up, your open non-registered account is your additional catch-up account. So wanted to give those two scenarios just to illustrate some points. So I'll pause there, and Leah, let me know if there are any questions coming in as we skip to the next slide.
Currently none yet. Don't forget, you can feel free to do so though. You can just go to Q&A or the chat below if you have any questions. There's also the raise your hand function. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions about any of the material we've covered so far.
Perfect. Thank you, Leah. So yes, please feel free. Questions are encouraged. Want to make this as interactive as possible. So Leah will keep monitoring that. And if any questions do come up, I will address them and be happy to interact. Perfect. So I wanted to get back to that insight that we had originally, which was if you're saving between 15 to 20% of your income annually, you're going to set yourself up for life. And if you gasped and said, wow, that's a lot, this is a slide to show how you can get to that by being strategic. So example one, say your taxable income for the 2021 tax year is 100,000. It's been a good year. You've managed to make 100,000. If you made a $15,000 RSP contribution, your tax refund, assuming you're paying tax in Ontario, would be about $5,300. So if you combine your tax refund with your RSP, that means your total savings is 20%. So essentially what you've done by allocating that $15,000 to your RSP is create another $5,000 of taxes, so of basically new found money, and added that together. So bringing your total savings from 15% to 20% by being strategic. So that's really the value of using your RSP and your higher tax rate if you're in a scenario where you've made, say, 100,000, for example. Might still make sense if you're under that, but that's just to show the tangible effects of turning 15% into 20% by being strategic. If you made that $15,000 contribution to your TFSA instead, you would not be generating an extra tax refund. So that $15,000 would carry on through and that would be your total savings. So we'll double click on this tax refund side of things and look at strategies to kind of further grow your savings in a few slides. But I just wanted to illustrate that because that's meaningful. I mean, you're essentially creating 5,000 out of thin air, and then you can use that to boost your short-term savings, pay down debt. So that's really quite remarkable, and it does make sense once you start getting to higher levels of income, assuming you have RSP room. So to double click and to further go on that point, if you made $200,000 and you save 30,000, sorry, which is 15%, your tax refund would be close to $15,000. I mean, that's real money. That's the government cutting you a check, assuming you've paid your taxes throughout the year, for $15,000 once you file your taxes. That's a nice surprise, as opposed to the opposite, where the government says, hey, you owe me $15,000. So if you add those together, you're turning 30 into 45 just by being strategic and assuming you have RSP room to contribute to. So that's where you can really turn your 15 into 20 or 20 into 25 by being strategic about this if you meet a few of these criteria. So that's how it all works together. And that's the magic that could be put together once you use your income to your advantage and you use what's available in terms of your contribution room to your advantage. So let's get to kind of creating your positive wealth spiral. This is something that Jeff's coined over the years. So we've essentially, let's follow example one. You've put 15 to your RSP before the deadline of March 1st, and you will now have a tax refund of $5,300 in this example, and that will come back to you once you file your taxes in April. So what can we do with that $5,300? Well, one, again, you can spend it, and then that puts you back in the original scenario, or you can look to build a positive wealth spiral with that newfound money. And two commonly held examples are, one, you can recontribute to your RSP. So that would be a contribution for next year, assuming you get the funds in April. You can contribute a portion to your RSP and to your TFSA. So you're building long-term savings, short-term savings. And if you also have debt, you can look to pay down debt with that amount. So you're essentially bringing newfound money and then using that to either increase your assets or lower your liabilities. So growing your net worth by being strategic. And that's a really great way of increasing your net worth over time and of basically creating newfound money and growing money on trees automatically, as Per would like to say. So a really nice tip there. And all you have to do is, one, make sure you have RSP room, you're generating income, and you have cash to invest, essentially.
I think Leia's got, hey Eric, I think Leia's got another question here that just came in. Leia, do you want to share that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So this one just came in. In a situation where I don't make the 50K threshold, but there's RSP matching offered through my employer, does it still make sense to only focus on my TFSA, or should I try and reach up to what they will match?
Good question. Another one of our pillars that we like to share with our savers is always take the free money. So if your employer is providing a matching component to the RSP and to TFSA, for example, we generally always encourage all of our clients to go up to that level of matching. So get all the free money that you can. Yes, likely there will be a vesting period, but essentially you are benefiting from free money. So if it's 4% that they're matching to and they match 100%, you're turning 4 into 8. And that's helping you achieve that 15 to 20% savings goal automatically. So even though you're under that 50, generally, if there's free money, I would recommend you to take it. There might be scenarios where you don't need to contribute to the RSP, but generally, if there's free money on the table, please do take it, unless it's a 5-year vesting period, 10 years, and you're retiring next year, for example. If that's something that you want to look into the details, be happy to, but rule of thumb, if there's free money, take up to the max. We generally don't recommend going over and above that, because generally then there's vesting and there are a few other options. So go up to the max of what you can get from that savings plan and what the matching requires. And then you know that you're doing your part. So good question. And thank you for that, Leia, and whoever posed that. So getting back to the debt or invest side of things. So a few questions that we can drill down on to help determine whether it makes sense to pay down your debt or to look to invest. And try to simplify this for you so you can kind of see conceptually how we think about this. So a few questions to ask. And again, this is assuming that either you own a home, or maybe you own investment property, or you have maybe student debt or line of credit debt. So number one is, what is your interest rate? So you can go on your online banking portal, see what your interest rate is, and is that interest rate fixed or variable? So that if you get all those details, we can look to make an assessment. Another portion is this tax deductible? So if it's a rental property, then that's an interest. You can deduct the interest on your taxes for your rental property. Question 2 is, what's your taxable income for the year? So it goes back to the first question that we asked is, look at your 2021 income. What's your taxable income for the year? And then what's your anticipated rate of return, which we'll get to? And are you currently saving an RRSP, TFSA, or non-registered account? So you put all that together, and let's conceptualize that as I move to the next slide. So this is a good way to conceptualize whether, let's lay a few examples. You own a home, you're at a good rate. So let's say, well, decent rate these days, I've heard you can get under 2%, which is crazy. But let's say you locked in at 3% and you're in a fixed rate for 3 years. If you say you have 20,000 to invest and you're looking, maybe I'll make an advance payment on the mortgage. This is your principal residence, so you can't deduct the interest. If you have that rate at 3%, your rate of return would essentially be 3%. You wouldn't see any cash flow changes until you renegotiated your mortgage. So say you have 4 years left, your cash flow would ultimately stay the same until you get to that point, but you'd be expediting the amount of capital that you've paid down, your amount of principal that you've paid down on your mortgage. But essentially your rate of return is 3%. That's the fixed rate at the current time, and you're paying down debt and you're getting essentially 3% on that. Look at the investing side of things, and if you have a 2-3 year time horizon, you're likely looking at, depending on how much risk you take, maybe close to 5 to 9%, but with a question mark. In any given year, you could be in a negative position, and especially if you take on more risky investments, you could be down 10%. I mean, you could be down 10% this year, depending on how much equity versus bonds that you have. So that's the play. But if you're looking over a 3-year horizon and you don't need those funds, then you have a little bit more of a margin of safety, and that will generally allow the investments to go up and down and to the right. So they're growing over the year. So if we stretch that out, and I pulled a few examples, you're likely going to be closer, maybe the 5-9% roughly, depending on how much, what your asset allocation looks like. So when we're looking to compare that, it depends on one, what's your time frame, and two, what is your rate of debt and what is your investor profile. So those are really some of the tools that we can use in determining whether it makes sense to pay down your debt versus invest. So I wanted to give an example here. So this is a balanced portfolio that we use quite often. It's one of the highest rated balanced portfolios from Fidelity, and balanced in the sense that it means 40% is fixed income. So your safe securities, your bonds, government bonds, maybe corporate bonds. So they don't pay a lot, but they don't tend to fluctuate that much. So that's in a sense your bedrock. So 40% is in safer investments that can steady the ship when things go up and down. And 60% would be in equities globally in this case. So companies, stocks, Disney, Tesla, you name it, depending on the investor preference. So in this case, you blend those all together. And if we look at 10-year returns for a balanced portfolio, they've done quite well. And this is essentially net of all fees. We've added the advisor fee and investment management fee. So if you invested over a 10-year period, you'd see annual returns of about 8.2%. And then this is what it looks like on an annual basis. So you have 10% years, you have 1% years, you have negative years, but you stretch that out and you're looking at, I mean, close to double-digit growth in 3 years, and then just under that in 5 to 10 year. So when you're looking to compare that, again, depends on your time horizon, because say you have 1 year to invest and then you need the funds, that year could be a 2018 and that's a negative year. So in that case, it might make sense to put it down against the debt where it's a sure 3%, for example. But if you do have a longer time horizon, generally investing, depending on your profile, does make sense and will allow your net worth to grow more so than paying down debt, especially if it's at a low rate. That changes a little bit if you're in a personal line of credit and that's unsecured, for example. Say you're in a closer to 6 to 7% range for your debt, then the conversion to the conversation gets a little murkier, because you're you're almost guaranteed to pay down that debt at 6 to 7% versus investing at 8%. I generally advise pay down the line of credit. That's a high rate. I get that off, and then we can look to invest. So there's a bit of an art and a science to that, but if your rate is closer to that range, then it does make sense to look to start paying debt down. But it is all a question of personal preference. If you want to start reducing your debt load and that feels good, then allocating a portion to that is beneficial. That's part of it. Wanted to give another example. So this is more of a if we look on the spectrum of balance to growth to aggressive, this is close to the growth to aggressive side of things if we look at investments. So this is 100% equities, whereas the previous one had 40% bonds, so safe investments, 60% equities, which are your growth side of things. This is all equities. So what we can see in this is that you might have some great years, but you might also have some not so good years. So in that case, if you were in 2018 and you have 1 year to invest, you could go down, up to 13%, which makes the conversation to pay down debt lean more towards that side. But if you're stretching it out, the 10-year numbers are, near 20%, which is quite remarkable. And I don't know if that will hold long term, but we hope so. So compared to 8%, so that's almost 10% by investing in 100% equities. But the caveat being is that you have to be able to stomach the volatility. We have big drops, and the only time you get hurt in these scenarios is if you get spooked and you see the market's down 30, 40, 50%, and you say, let's take some risk off the table. Then you're crystallizing your losses, and that's the only time that you really get spooked. So our job as advisors is to make sure that that doesn't happen. And it's hard to know how you're going to react unless you face that scenario and you've been there. So that's what we try to help navigate that. But I wanted to show the two different investment classes to show that difference in returns over time and in any given year. Leah, any questions
We're currently looking good.
Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about crypto. I don't know who's into the realm, but it's starting to make its way to the mainstream side of things. And it was interesting. I was reading about it yesterday night, and the states haven't yet approved a Bitcoin ETF. So you can't buy Bitcoin on the ETF market in the States yet, but they have in Canada. So the odd time that Canada is almost on the forefront, which is interesting. So it is finding its way into modern money management. And one of the top fund managers that we like to work with on the innovation side, Mark Schmel, who manages that fund, the Special Situations and Global Innovators Fund that we were looking at previously, they've just started to hire a few kind of crypto experts to look to make sense of the space and see how they can integrate that. So it's something to keep an eye on. There are different ways of integrating. There are companies that are coming up in the space, and there are options to have that invested professionally. The big drawback is it's so volatile. So if we're looking at 100% equities and that being very volatile, essentially the most volatile in the equities market, Bitcoin and the cryptos and all the doges would be one step further. So that's further along the spectrum. There are ways of having professional managers kind of manage that for you and take some of the volatility out. And we're just starting to see some investment funds in that realm. But I wanted to touch upon that. It's something that does come up often. Just today, a new fund came out on that front on the CI side of things. So it's something I'm monitoring. I'm getting a lot of questions on it from clients, though some are managing on their own, but there are options available to get some exposure, but reduce the volatility and risk on that front. So wanted to touch upon that. Okay, so getting back to the investments, this is just one thing that we like to harp on is be careful of the trends. And that's not to say that Bitcoin is a trend and it's here to go away, but essentially what we're trying to say is don't go all in on any of these given trends. If you're passionate about one of these aspects, sure, carve some money aside, but what you should be doing is that 15 to 20%, that should be for future you, and that shouldn't be in the most volatile asset class. You can carve some money out if you're passionate about an area and you want to divest and you think things are going to go well, but carve that 15 to 20% out and then take any added money and look to do what you like on that front. But make sure you're taking care of your future you first. Wanted to give one example to kind of home this point. This was at the peak of COVID. So when regulations started appearing, offices started to shut down. and I think CERB checks or government checks were starting to make their way into bank accounts. There was a run-up on Zoom Technologies Inc. stock, one that spiked up. It was, under $5 stock. And as offices were closing, traders and do-it-yourself investors were getting all gung-ho about this stock. Only problem was this wasn't the Zoom communications that makes the very software that we're using today. It was a completely unrelated Zoom Technologies Inc. that I believe made a plastic manufacturer or something on the textile side of things. And the US SEC, so the Securities Exchange Commission, had to come in and stop investments because investors weren't doing their research and jumping on Zoom and saying, oh, this is a Zoom that I think it is. Let's put all this money in. So there are investors that kind of put money in during this point, lost an extreme amount of money as they realized, oh, I didn't do my due diligence and I put money in something that I thought was something else. And I got to, I did not get to reap the rewards. So that spiked up and down very quickly and a lot of money was lost. So that's just to say that there are ways to lose money in this market. And that's why there are so many professional fund managers that are out there. For one, some of these managers have billions of dollars at their disposal. So they're able to get access to company CEOs that are unparalleled in a sense of what a DIY investor or your cousin who manages his funds from his couch can do. So that's one of the competitive advantages that you do have in working with professional money managers. They also get early access to, say, IPOs or buy-ins at companies at early stages. So you know that if you're working with professional management, this type of thing generally doesn't happen. So that's one nice way of kind of putting yourself at ease in that sense. And then the last one was, we've seen a lot of bubbles recently. One was going back to the weed craze, and I do see a lot of similarities on the crypto side of things with it seems like every day there's a new coin that comes out. So in that realm, if you're passionate about an industry, by all means, look to dabble, but again, carve out the money that you need for your future. You make sure that that's invested properly. And then if you want to make a few bet plays, then do that on your own time, but don't jeopardize your future self by doing so. If you put all your money into weed stocks, which were a craze back in, I recall, university, everybody says everything's making money. Things don't look so rosy now, and people don't tend to talk about them. And the ones that still are holding on are waiting for a rebound, and that might not happen. So those funds might just go to die there. So there are ways to lose money, and if you don't work with somebody on the professional side, you can run into some of these traps. But that's why we exist, and that's why the industry as a whole exists. So I wanted to look at those two examples. Those two examples are more on the equity and the crazy speculative side. So what about if you're saying, I don't really like investments, I'm just going to keep money under my mattress or in a savings account, and I should be okay. This is showing up to 2019, but the rates are similar for 2020 and 2021. Actually, the cash returns would be even less, and inflation would be even higher. So your real cash return is even further negative. So what this goes to show is that if you're keeping your money in the high interest savings, instead of investing it, you're actually kind of losing purchasing power because the rate of return on that investment is lower than the rate of inflation. So your purchasing power is unfortunately going minimizing over time. So that's not the way to do it either. There are some ways in which keeping money in a high interest savings makes sense, especially if you have expenses coming up in the next few months. But there's a balance between the two, and that's where the investments realm really rings true. And this puts it all together. It shows you if you started, I think 30 years ago, say, and you put money in a GIC, that's where you'd be. That's a 5-year GIC. And if you put money in the investment side of things, this is the delta. So this is the growth and the value. So there's tremendous value in being invested. With that comes the ups and downs, and comes the ability to stomach it, which is different for all individuals. That's something that we help with. That's part of our role. But this just goes to show that over time, you definitely are better off investing. So it's a question of what your time horizon is, when you'll need the money, but all of that we can help with and address it. The other point I wanted to share is, yes, there's been market volatility these days, but part of being an investor is almost going counter to what you're hearing in the news. And a phrase that I've heard coined recently was volatility equals opportunity. So whenever you hear that the market is down, one, think, well, actually, there's opportunity because there's choppiness in the waters. And two, think that the market is on sale. That's another point that Jeff always harps on is when the market is down, that means companies are on sale. That means good businesses where their fundamentals haven't changed are now being offered, a piece of that business is being offered at a lower price. And when else in this realm do you run away from a sale? I mean, if you go to your favorite store and things are on sale, would you get out and run away, or would you run too? So there's almost a counterintuitiveness to the investment side of things. And yes, there's uneasiness, and yes, there are pressures that on interest rates and inflation that might bring rates up, but that's always going to be the case. That's what COVID brought about with that -30, -40 drop. And then we saw one of the best rebounds in recent history. So all that going to say that don't be afraid of the volatility. That's the trade-off for being invested. If you don't want it, keep the money under the mattress, but you're going to lose purchasing power. So there is a balance. You don't want to be uneasy every day, but there definitely is a balance and a way to put that all together. So just a point on current market conditions and not to worry about the daily volatility. In every given year, there's going to be a market drop. And generally, the more activity, the more opportunity there are for the professional managers to be picking up good companies at discounted rates, and for investors who stay invested to see those results in 3-6 months when things correct and come back. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's presentation. 2 helpful tips and resources that I wanted to share. So number 1 is an RRSP savings calculator that we use. Leah and the team is going to be sending out an email to all the participants with a recording of this webinar and also these 2 helpful tips and reminders. And this will help gauge kind of what your savings could be. Now, happy to review that with anybody, but we'll send that out so you can do some preliminary notes. So that's an RRSP savings calculator. Put in your estimated income, put in how much you have to invest, and it'll give you a sense for what your refund looks like, which is great. And the 2 is a reminder that the RRSP deadline is March 1st, though we strongly encourage everybody to start thinking about this now, almost get it in now, because that helps avoid some unnecessary anxiety later. And like I said previously, there's a bit of volatility, so there's some opportunity and the market is on sale, especially if your time horizon is long, given that you're putting money in an RRSP. So great time to start looking at this now. It's helpful for tax time too, which will come next, but that's the first deadline. That falls on a Tuesday. So 2 points there. So to summarize, put this all together. If you're a high income earner, if you're making more than $100,000, makes a lot of sense to contribute to your RRSP and then use that refund that you're generating to boost your savings in the form of TFSA or pay down debt, or even another RRSP contribution for the following year. If you're in the 50 to 100 range, it might make sense to save a portion to your TFSA and your RRSP, which we can help you outline together. And if you're making less than 50, generally makes sense to save to your TFSA. That being said, there's always some areas where it does make sense to, for example, if there's matching plans available, take the free money. So there are some gray areas with those, but those are some kind of big rule of thumbs that we can share in those 3 tax brackets. So with that, I will pause for questions, and I will thank everybody for sharing their lunch hour so far with us today.
Thank you, Sue. Sue Martin says, thank you very much, Eric. I also want to say, Eric, great summary. Thank you for staying on track. Great answers to some of the questions there. Really helpful.
Wonderful. So I will just wait a second to see if any of the attendees have questions. Ose, I know you were burning with some questions, so please feel free to share your knowledge, and I'd be happy to answer if you do have a question in mind. Jazz Paul, Nat, hello. Hello, Selena. Hi, Sue. Hello, Jay Owen. And hi, Christine. So thanks, everybody, for sharing this lunch hour. I'll wait another minute or so. Before I do that, I wanted to share our upcoming schedule of events. We've put together some really great webinars, and thanks to the power of Zoom, we've been able to really interact with speakers that are outside of our realm and bring individuals together. So we like to do this on the lunch hour. Hopefully that works for you. If you can't make it, but you're interested in a topic, please sign up anyways. We always send out the copy of the recordings to anybody who's registered. So that's a great way. You'll get it in your inbox. And then if you have any questions, you can just fire off an email to us. You'll have us in your inbox there. So great way of doing that and keeping informed. So our next up on our list as part of our business owner series, is starting and ending an employment relationship with your employees. And that's with Sarah Manhout of North Star HR Solutions. Per and Sarah will be taking us through that. So if you're a business owner and you have questions about HR and how to improve that side of your business, please join us for that. Sarah's a great speaker, very engaging, and Per does a nice job of bringing some scenarios to light. So please join us for that just after Valentine's Day, I guess February 16th. And then we go into tax mode in March. So we're going to have a personal Ask Me Anything tax side of things with a tax expert that we work with. So please feel free, bring your questions. Great time to get you into tax mode and answer any questions that you might have. Government might have some new credits that they're sharing. So it's a good time just to do a quick pulse check on what's available to you and what you can deduct for the year. So it does help get into that tax mode. And on the corporate side of things, we will have an AMA Ask Me Anything the next Thursday. So keep an eye out for those. We will be sending those out shortly. We might have sent our first round, but we will send reminders to everybody as well. And if you do have another topic that you'd like to cover, please do feel free to send us a note. We'd be happy to do that. We like bringing experts in and sharing their thoughts. So if you have any ideas or are interested in any other realms, please share that with us, share that with Leah, and we'll put something together. So
thank you, Christine, for your comments. Nice seeing you, and stay in touch. Absolutely, Eric, great job again. Guys, we're always available to run through these topics personally if someone has any questions, and we always, if you missed the webinar, sign up anyways, because we'll send it out to you. We'll also post it to our YouTube channel, which people find useful. So thank you so much, Eric.
My pleasure. Thanks everybody for coming on. We hope you learned something, and we hope this inspires some action, either in the form of a review or you taking the stand and having a look at how you can improve your financial position for this year and even for last year.
A big shout out to Leah for organizing the webinar and keeping us organized. Thank you so much, Leah.
Thanks, Leah. That was good.
Sounds good.
Beautiful. So with that, I think we will close the call and thank everybody again. Leah will be sending out the recording and any of those and 2 of those resources that we had there. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. And then if you wanted to book a follow-up or you wanted to chat, please feel free to reach out, as we are more than happy to do so. We are in RSP savings mode. So your questions and comments are always welcome at this time during these money months. So thanks again to everybody and enjoy the rest of this day.